Hello, welcome to our book study, Rise of the False Gods, written by me, Alicia Leslie. It's all about transformation through illumination. Sometimes it's like we're walking around, in the dark, bumping into things, wondering, why does that keep happening? And all we need to do is turn on the light. So that's kind of the intention of this book and my desire to help you to live a life of enlightenment. We're currently in pretty dark times, and we have to remember that the darkness, the shadows have no true power. The power is in light. And when enlightenment hits us, the shadows are gone. Everything is gone. I've seen this happen in my life so many times, and I think as we go through the book and you learn more, you'll agree about that. So just a reminder, you can go to Facebook and to see me even after. Well, you can go to YouTube after, because I will be uploading this. You can go to YouTube and look up Rise of the False Gods, Alicia Leslie, and it should take you to the folder that has all that stuff in it. Hopefully I'll be able to speak for the rest of the evening, because we're going to be talking about corporate or collective sin. Yes, we are still on sin, but we're working our way out of it. We have, let's see, how many pages? Well, don't worry about it. We're just going to do it. All right. So let's begin by understanding what corporate or collective sin is. I'm reading from the book, page 52, right where the topic line is. And it says, and try to visualize this as I'm speaking, every organ, cell, and tissue of our body serves the whole body. Every part of our body works for the common good, the good of the whole. Likewise, every part of creation exists to assure the good of the whole. Now, let's pretend a flower had free will. Imagine the effect if it withheld its fragrance or pollen or color from any other part of creation. If this happened, it would be dire and devastating to the whole. Because even that little flower, even that little dandelion, even that little tiny clover flower that we mow through and chop up with our mower, they are all a part of the greater whole. I was thinking about that today, about, the flowers and giving of all, and I realized the flowers don't stress. They just live. They live at being a part of the greater whole. They let their fragrance go out and attract the birds and the bees. They freely release the pollen, which the bees take and pollinate all other kinds of plants and makes them prosperous. And the fragrance draws. It's the whole thing. The color draws the bees and the birds and the other things that get fed by this. So it's really, really important to know that even we, you and me, we're all an integral part of a greater whole. And we can either choose to be a part of that whole, or we can choose to think only of ourselves. When we think only of ourselves, we are missing the mark of perfection. It's like missing a piece of a puzzle. If you want the puzzle to be whole, guess what? You're a part of it, and so am I. But again, going back, that the flower gives everything it has and doesn't stress. Meanwhile, we try to hang on to stuff, to control stuff, to claim stuff, And what do we get for it? Stress, ulcers, nervous breakdowns, high blood pressure, all that kind of thing. We should be like the flowers. Just freely give the best that we have because we're giving it to the whole. Okay. But flowers don't have free will. Human beings do. And a sin, an error, is committed whenever a human being intentionally uses their free will in a way that does not support the whole. Now, this can get tricky with things like war and pollution cause harm to the whole. When a virus, a pandemic comes in and is hurting the whole, we are each a part of getting past that. And what do we want to get past that? We want enlightenment. We want to know, why is this happening? And how can we prevent it from happening again? God's not punishing us, by the way. The virus has come to teach us. And I, for one, want to learn. Not by having it. Don't want to get intimate with it. I want to learn by observation as I wear my mask and social distance. Why? Because that's the very best I can do to protect all of us. A lot of people don't realize when they put their seatbelt on in the car, they are really not just protecting themselves. They are protecting the other people in the car. Because should there be an accident and you don't have your seatbelt on, you become a very dangerous projectile that could hurt other people. See? It's all about the good of the whole. As far as war and such goes, we know there's something wrong with war. There's inherently something wrong with war because we were born to live and to express and to co-create. And if there weren't something wrong with war, people would not come home, bless their precious hearts and souls, with PTSD and other war injuries. But over all these years, we haven't figured out yet. The way I see it is there's enough of us that if we put our heads together and figured it out, we learn to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. How can we be responsible for someone else's sin, for their actions? Is it guilt by association? Can we be punished for someone else's sin? Excuse me. I lost my tea. I don't know where I left it. But, you know me. Can't stop breathing through my mouth when I talk. Okay. Punished by God? No. God does not punish. Suffer negative effects? Yes. We are not exempt from the effects of a collective cause. If someone is polluting, if a big business is polluting, and we don't work and put our energy into stopping it, we will be stuck with the bad air. Excuse me, I must get my little water because I got a tickle that beats the bus. And thank you for your patience. I have my crabby till I get my coffee cup, but it's got tea in it. Alrighty then, back to business. We are not exempt from the effects of a collective cause. That's why we either need to focus on being a part of the solution, and if we don't, we're a part of the problem. People don't like to hear that. They say that, it makes them feel guilty. This isn't about guilt. It's simply about cause and effect. It's principle, not personal. Boy, I'll bet you heard me say that a lot. And you still will. And I'll bet sometimes when you hear it, you go, oh yeah, that's right. Shifting lower consciousness of groups of people, I'm in the next to the last paragraph on this page, 52. Shifting the lower consciousness of groups of people has many names, including mob mentality, herd mentality, and groupthink. Those are all ways where we influence a group. And it's interesting because lots of things influence us. In a band, music, if we go to a concert, that music does influence us. Remember when we talked about the words influence and inspiration? Inspiration is spiritual, and it calls us and feeds us and makes us want to be a positive part of the greater whole. Whereas influence coming into us from lower consciousness very often makes us more likely to look at self and what I want and my lower nature. This is how people are manipulated to adopt certain behaviors and beliefs from outside sources. This includes friends, advertising, and emotion. You got to watch when that emotion gets in there. That's when we put a thought and a feeling together and something is going to manifest. And if we want to get past that, we have to try to nip it in the bud, to catch it before it blooms, to not manifest something we don't want. The same influence that causes riots is responsible for shifts in cultural values and morals. It's important that we remember about the lower carnal mind, once called race consciousness. Now, here's the way consciousness moves. Race consciousness simply means human race. That's what they called it. The human race is different than the other parts of the animal kingdom. We have free will and opposable thumbs. So so they call things about the human race, and that's what was race consciousness. Race consciousness was the lower part of human consciousness. Well, over time, that became politically incorrect because race consciousness, meaning human race, started to get confused with racial prejudice. And I am what is called a Fillmorian. Excuse me. Charles Fillmore is the co-founder of Unity. He and his wife, Myrtle, developed and started the Unity movement. And yes, it was a time of antiquated words, but anybody that knows me knows I just love antiquated words and use them whenever I can. Dag nabbit. Those are some of my favorites. So, hang on a minute. I went by a note. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything important. Oh, yes, I was just pointing out from Scripture, all things work together for good for those who love the Lord. And if we look at Lord as law, as principle, when we love, which means are attracted to and abide in principle, we can't go wrong. When we start putting ourselves before the greater whole, where we have trouble. Through misunderstanding, again, human race consciousness was confused with the lower mind. That's called populism. If something isn't popular, or when something gets popular, we all kind of shift along with it, And sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it's not such a good thing. And of course, it's always best to use your own mind. Populism is wreaking havoc on planet Earth today, because when we have populism, we have people very tied to their way of the way it needs to be. And that is not healthy because it stops us living the oneness that we are. And there's a great explanation of how this works. It's a story called The 100th Monkey. The 100th Monkey, it was about an experiment that was done, a study that resulted in this theory. There were these monkeys. I can't remember what kind of monkeys they were, but there were these monkeys. And they were studying them and feeding them and watching their different, actions. And after a while, they saw one of the monkeys started to wash the sweet potatoes because she didn't like that gritty in her teeth, Then she taught it to her babies, and then she taught it to the other monkeys. And next thing you know, everybody on the island was washing their sweet potatoes before they ate them. Strangely enough, later on, they went to another island. And on that island, all the monkeys were washing their sweet potatoes. You see, the ideas are all out there in consciousness. Some are good, some not so good. But so this thing, it's like transfer of thought, a stream of consciousness where they pick up and share. Here's another example. Have you ever had wonton? Pretty good. How about pierogies? Yes. How about raviolis? Well, getting hungry just talking about this. It's all about the food, okay? So somehow this realm of divine ideas, these different things came into being. And that's not just about food, it's about ways of living, it's about culture. Oh yes, there are still, certain cultural things, but we always want to look at those ideas that are out in the realm. And that's why I want to keep our consciousness lifted up. So the ideas that we get are from a higher source as opposed to, I'm gonna say it, race consciousness. Meaning human race, meaning human, meaning lower, meaning me before we. Is it a myth? Is it fake news? Is it just a story? Who knows? But it makes sense to pay attention. Okay. Jesus told us that we should be in the world but not of it. To be of the world is to be living under the influence of lower consciousness. To be in the world, that's to be of the world. To be in the world but not of the world means that we can walk among the consciousness and still sort out truth from fiction, right from wrong, light from darkness, enlightenment from ignorance. You can be in the world without being of it. And as we all walk our spiritual path, that gets to be easier and easier to do. You see, a lower state of consciousness can be compromised, but a higher state of consciousness cannot. This is why prayer and meditation are important. This is why staying positive is important. It's why going to church is important, because you surround yourself and make connections with people who think the way you do. Okay. Well, I made it through that one, and that was a long page. Lately, with the current political crises, the virus, the fires, and the distress that is going on planet-wide, it's very challenging, and it's easy to become depressed or distressed or despondent or apathetic. But I want you to know, we are all a part. Your kidneys are working with your liver, which is working with your heart, which is working with your brain, which is working with your medulla oblongata, which is working with your trachea. It's all working together, and you are a part of that. And if you want to be a positive part of that, you want to avoid collective or corporate sin, which is error, which is useless, unnecessary suffering. Okay? Okay, so are you feeling maybe a little, oh, there's so much to be done. I don't know if I can do it all. You don't have to do it all. We're all in this together, okay? What you have to do is be a light, because as you are a light, you chase away someone else's shadows. And then when they're looking for the light, they know right where to look. They're going to look to you. And if you're grounded in your spiritual truth, all will be well. I want to share a very special reading from, it was written by a man named Canon Farrar. And this says, oh, first of all, before that, and this is very important today in the days of fake news. This is from Sirach, which is the Book of Wisdom, 11:7. Do not find fault before you investigate. Examine first, then criticize. Gotta think about that sometimes, because it sure is easy to judge, isn't it? Okay. This is a beautiful thing I hope you take into your heart. If you got the book, write it down somewhere. I am only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And that which I can do, I ought to do. And what I ought to do, by the grace of God, I will do. And so will you. Thank you. Tomorrow, we're going to be doing the 7 deadly sins and their antidotes. So there's hope for all of us. Have a great night. God bless. See you tomorrow.